Hey guys, welcome to Rage RC. Shooting another video today talking about my Slash two-wheel drive and basically what the changes I've made as far as setup wise to make it a little more of a competitive Spec Slash racer. So just want to talk about the changes I made real quick. Shouldn't be too much of a big video or big production here, but yeah, essentially this is an all stock Slash. Everyone's got different rules on what you got to run for Spec Slash. Our local racetrack doesn't have super strict rules, but I'm pretty much trying to keep this, 100% stock as much as possible. Really only changing like some of the tuning parts and some of the shock wells and such. So some quick tips real quick. One thing to do, I would say off the bat, is basically set your steering up correctly. So what you'll notice is you've got steering links controlling basically the length of the left and right turnbuckles, and you want to make sure those are 100% the same. So take some calipers, measure those out, make sure they're equidistant, exact same length, and that the wheels are pointing straight. And then you also want to make sure basically your servo saver there and this rod are all at 90 degrees. So you want this to be at 90 degrees, this at 90 degrees, and this at 90 degrees. And I found out of the box these links weren't quite the same length. This rod was a little bit long, so you weren't getting exact steering left and right. It wasn't symmetrical, so making that little change will basically make it drive a little more correctly in steering wise. And then in terms of suspension, something I've been playing around with is basically shock wells. What I'm actually running and what I've sort of set it on is basically 35 weight associated oil up front and 30 weight oil in the back. Seems to be pretty balanced, matches the spring rates really well. I'm not running any different springs, but in terms of limiters, I'm running no limiters in the front and basically one big limiter in the back, as you can see there. And then in terms of shock mounting positions, the fronts, I've actually moved them out one hole on the arms. That basically makes them a little more progressive, a little bit stiffer feeling overall. It also limits the droop a little bit, so the wheels don't hang down quite as far. When you're going through the corners, you're not going to roll quite as much. So I do recommend the outside holes. If you're running really big jumps, you may want to run the inside holes just to get a little more droop, a little more shock absorption. But on most, sort of high traction tracks, I think the outside holes work a little better. And then in the rear, for the shocks, I'm basically running them one hole from the very outside. So not quite all the way out, but one hole from the very outside. And that matches the front pretty well. So what you get overall is basically, a little bit more of a balanced shock absorption. It lands the jumps a little better, it'll corner a little better, won't roll quite as much, and give you a little more, I think, performance overall. And then in terms of electronics, I'm basically trying to keep the electronics the same without really modifying too much. So I'm using the original Traxxas connector, and then basically run a direct connection to the batteries itself. Short battery, mounted all the way up front, will give you a little more balanced weight distribution left and front and back. So with the rear motor, obviously it's kind of rear weight bias, especially with the ESC all the way back there. So run that up front, balances out a little bit. I also got rid of that bulky receiver box and mounted my receiver and basically transponder all the way up here in the front. Kind of mirrors the servo right here and gives a little bit more balance left to right. And then two other quick tips that I think help quite a bit. So running some kind of traction compound. I usually use liquid wrench lubricating oil. I run it in this McCune tire saucing bottle. It actually is a very nice bottle. Highly recommended. But yeah, using some kind of traction compound on the tires will soften up a little bit, give you a little more traction. I'm running stock tires, obviously, and so that's a little trick that will help you out. And the last thing I recommend is basically running some kind of diff locking grease. So what I've got here is basically Bad Horsey diff locking grease. It's basically like this super sticky, almost like chewing gum texture type stuff, kind of like taffy-ish. But basically you open up the diff, clean everything out, get rid of the black grease that is in there, throw as much of this stuff in as you can. It's really hard to get out and sort of get in there without getting all over the place, so it's a pain in the butt to apply. But if you do that, you actually get some pretty good diff action. Basically, it's not going to like freewheel quite so much. You get about a half turn when I flick one side. So that's about the correct diff action. I probably went about 2/3 or 3/4 full. Try to get as much in as you can, and I think that'll be just about the right amount of diff action. And that way you actually get a little more traction accelerating out of the corners. The last thing I did was basically go up a couple teeth on the pinion gear. The stock gearing, I forget what the stock gearing is, but it's geared a little bit low for this motor. You know, it's kind of meant for, you know, short grass or running in a little bit of, you know, sand or whatnot you might want to try to run this truck in. But you know, on most high traction surfaces you can run a little bit bigger tooth pinion, and that'll give you a little more top speed overall. So there's some quick tips. That's pretty much what I'm running on my Spec Slash racer here. The class is not super popular, so I'm probably going to just start doing basically a build series on this truck, basically going through all the modifications that I think basically improve the performance the most. So look for a series on that soon, and you know, I'll probably go one video per modification and tell you what I think about the modification and why I did it. So that pretty much wraps it up. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit that like button if you can. If you have any comments and other tips and tricks you found for a Spec Slash racer, you know, I'd love to hear them. So please throw those down in the comments. And thanks for watching. Take care, guys.